Welcome back to another tutorial, and in today's tutorial we're going to learn exactly how to make this 3D printable twist lock container inside Fusion 360. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump right into it and get started. So with the blank new canvas open up within Fusion 360, the first thing we want to do here is to create a total of two new components. To do that, let's hover over to create, new components, and let's go ahead and name this to lid. This will be the lid for our design that snaps onto our container. Once that's done, press OK. Now, hovering over to the top level component, which is also named unsaved, or by default to whatever you saved it to, go ahead and toggle this on, then click on Create, New Component, and then go ahead and change this to Container, and press OK. Once that's done, what we want to do now is to create the container for our design. To do that, we can hover over to Create Sketch, then select the bottom plane, and from here, what we want to do is create a center diameter circle. From the origin, let's go ahead and drag this out to around 76 millimeters and press OK. From here, let's press E on our keyboard or the extrude command and drag this up to around 60 millimeters. Once that's done, what we need to do here is to create the offset for our top face here. This is the piece that's going to allow us to set the twist lock mechanism for our lid. To do that, we're going to press this top face here, then press O on our keyboard, which is the offset tool, and taking this outer edge and then just dragging this in to around -5 millimeters. Once that's done, press OK. From here, selecting this profile, pressing E on your keyboard or extrude, let's go ahead and extrude this up by around 5 millimeters, set the operation to join, and press OK. The next thing we want to do here is to create our lid. To do that, let's go hover over to the component for lid and toggle that on. Next, we can actually toggle off our container, which is the container component, and then toggle off the bodies for this container. Then we can also toggle on sketches and then turn off the sketches we won't need for this design. What we want to do is to select the sketches that we use to create our container one and use that to create the lid. This will be relevant later on, especially if you want to change the size of this design. From here, pressing E on our keyboard, let's go ahead and set the distance here to around 8 millimeters, set it to new body, press OK. From here, you should see that we've created a lid for our design, but it's actually hosted in the lid section component that we've created and not in the container one. And the reason why we did this is that we can essentially use sketches within container one or within this component and use that as a sketch or a profile for a different component. It's almost like projecting what is shown here within this folder into this folder without having to create an entirely new sketch. The next thing we want to do here is toggle on container one, then go ahead and toggle on the body once again. And now what we want to do is combine these two, but we want this to cut into the lid here. To do that, we're going to press S on our keyboard, type in combine, then select the target body. The target body is the lid. The tool body is the container. And what we want to do is change the operation from join, if you have it to join, change it to cut. Make sure keep tools is toggled on and press OK. Now, if you're to double check, turn off body one, and look underneath your design, you should see that there's a cutout of our container one inside the lid, which is what we're looking for. The next step in this process is to finish up or create the twist lock mechanism for our container. To do that, let's hover over to container one, toggle that on, turn off our lid, then turn back on the body if you had it turned off. Hover over to create sketch, then select this face here, and let's go ahead and create some sketches for this design. To do that, what we want to do is project the features on this face here, so that way we can use these lines as a reference without creating another sketch. To do that, we can press S on our keyboard, type in project, then select the first one here, and then select this face here. Once that's done, press OK. And now as you can see, Fusion 360 will populate these purple lines, which we can now use to create profiles. Pressing L on our keyboard, let's go ahead and create a profile from the very center all the way to the middle. Let's create one from the top to the bottom, one more to the bottom, and one more to the bottom. What we've done here is create a total of 4 lines. The first line should be from the middle to the bottom, while the other 3 should be lines that are just separated throughout the entirety of this design here. Additionally, if it also helps, you can also turn off sketches, so that way you can see what you're working with when you hover over it. The next thing we need to do here is press O on our keyboard, then select this inner profile or this inner edge here, and just drag this out. Now, the distance between this edge to this inner edge here is 5 millimeters. So we're going to go ahead and position this to around 2.5, so that way it sits right in the middle. The next thing we need to do here is to create the circle, which is going to allow our twist lock to kind of lock in. Before we do that, let's go ahead and set up some dimensions for these lines. To do that, we can press D on our keyboard, then select the middle line and the line on the right, and we can set this to 5 millimeters. We can also do the same for this line to this line here. This will also be 5 millimeters. And while this line to this line here will be 10 millimeters. Now, you might be asking, why is this one here on the right-hand side 10 millimeters, while this one and this one 5? Well, the reason why is because these two profiles are what we're going to use to extrude this up and to create the locking mechanism. So these two need to fit into the lid, or more specifically, the lid needs to fit into the container, which is why we have this cut out here. So these two, once they're fully made, can actually slide in from the top bottom, and then you can rotate it over to the left. Now, it's easier said than done, and it's probably better to show you what it looks like before actually doing it. So to do that, what we want to do for the last piece here for our last sketch is to create the circle, which is going to allow that snap effect. To do that, we can hover over to center diameter circle, then zoom in, create a circle from here in the middle, and let's set some dimensions for this circle. Pressing D on your keyboard, selecting the circle, I'm going to dimension this to around 1.2 and press enter. I'm also going to press D once again, select the center of the circle to this line, and dimension this in to around 2.5. I'm also going to repeat the exact same thing by selecting the center diameter circle on the right hand side, dragging this out, setting some dimensions for this circle, and also setting that circle the exact same size as the circle we have on the left. Additionally, I'm also going to set the dimension from left to right here, so that way it's the same distance from each other. By now, you should have created two circles. This circle sits in the middle with a 1.2 millimeters in radius, or the diameter of it, and from left to right here, from this dot to this circle is 2.5, while the one on the right hand side also matches the same with this dot here. Now with that done, it might look complicated at first, but don't worry, I'll walk you through this as we start designing this. Let's go ahead and move any designs or references to our design here and move it out the way. The first thing we want to do here is select this profile, pressing E on our keyboard, drag this up. Make sure the operation is set to join and press OK. The next thing we want to do here is also toggle on the extrude command, which is the extrude 3. Double click that. Then holding shift, we can also toggle on this feature here, so we can also extrude that there. Next, what we want to do is to create the cutout, more specifically this profile, so that way it can lock into the lid that we're going to create. From here, we're going to press E on our keyboard. Then we're going to set this to 2.5 millimeters. But here's the trick. Instead of moving this up all the way to the top, then creating a cutout here in the middle, what we actually can do is create the starting point and set that to offset. From here, we can offset this in to around 2.5. And as you can see, the starting point for our design here is actually in the middle instead of at the bottom. So we essentially created a 2.5 millimeter offset in the middle and then created this extrude 2.5 millimeters going up. Once that's done, press join. The next thing we want to do here is to create a press pull for this design. And the reason for this is because 3D printing, although it's accurate, there are some factors we need to consider, especially when it comes to creating some clearances for the lid and container to fit. In basic words, it basically means that if we were to turn on our lid and then pretend like there was automatically a cutout, although within Fusion it looked like it might fit, it won't, because our filament tends to heat up and contract and expand once it cools down. So to do that, let's hover over to this face, right click, press pull, and what I want you to do is to select all of the faces for this design. We're going to select this outer ring here, then select this face, then the face on the right and on the left. And let's go ahead and offset this in, or press pull this in by around -0.4. Once that's done, press OK. The next thing we want to do here is to create a chamfer, so that way we don't need supports underneath this bridge here. Let's press S on our keyboard, type in chamfer, then select this edge and this edges, and let's chamfer this in to, let's just say 1.5 or until it meets in the middle. So somewhere around 1.25 should be the middle. And as you can see, now we have that chamfer effect, so that way we don't need supports for this design. Press OK. With that fully completed, let's go ahead and circular pattern this by pressing S on our keyboard, type in circular pattern, then selecting the features relevant to this design. We're going to go ahead and select the last 4 features. Select the axis, which is going to be our Z axis. To select that, we can toggle off our body, then select the Z axis, toggle it back on, then press OK. And now if you toggle off sketch 3 and revolve this all the way around, now you can see this effect fully made onto our design here. The next thing we need to do here is to create the shell or the opening for our container. To do that, we can press S on our keyboard, type in shell, then select the first option that populates here, and select the top face here. Let's go ahead and shell this in by about 3 millimeters. And as you can see, Fusion 360 has populated an error here. Now don't worry, we can go ahead and fix that. Now to create our shell without having to go back in time or having to delete any of these features, what we can actually do is just move this cursor here back about 4 steps. From here, we can actually use the shell command or the shell feature once again by pressing S on our keyboard, type in shell, selecting the first option, then selecting the face and shelling this in by around 3 millimeters. Once that's done, press OK. From here, we can move this back forward around 5 or 6 steps. And now we have those features toggled back on. And although Fusion 360 initially gave us a warning, you can see if we went back in time and added it where it was able to be added, we can actually add new features to this without having to delete any sort of work that we've done on our design. The next thing we need to do here is to create the cutouts for the lid. To do that, we can hover over to our lid components. And what we need to do is to use the sketches that we use to make this design and to cut into our lid with that. Now we pretty much already have the cutout for our lid in the very bottom. But what we're really looking for is the cutout that actually wraps around this entirety of this design. So to create that, let's hover over to container 1, let's turn off body 1, then let's turn on sketch 3. Sketch 3 is what we'll be using to cut into this design here. Now, as you can see, we currently only have sketch 3 shown here. So with all that said, to create the cutout, let's hover over to lid 1, then selecting these profiles that we just made, in addition to the cutouts for the holes here. Let's go ahead and cut this in to around -5 millimeters or 5 millimeters and press cut. Now, as of right now, we currently only have the outline of this, meaning that now we have the cutout for this to fit in, but we need something to lock this in. To do that, what we want to do is select this profile here, then press E, and let's drag this up to around 2.5 millimeters. Once that's done, press OK. The next thing we want to do here is chamfer this edge here. So if we turn off sketch 3 and take a better look, you can see that although this is technically correct, we also want to chamfer these edges here. To do that, press S on our keyboard, type in chamfer, then selecting chamfer, we're going to go ahead and select these edges here. And you can kind of see it, kind of can't. It's a little bit difficult to find it, but feel free to reorient it to get a better look. And there you go. Now we have our design fully chamfered with a flat surface. I went ahead and set this to 1.25 and press OK. Now with that done, what I want to do is use the section analysis feature within Fusion 360. To use this tool, this basically allows us to create a cutout of wherever we want to see into. Now, this is better shown than telling you, so to do that, let's hover over to container 1 and toggle on body 1. Then, pressing S on our keyboard, type in section analysis. It's going to be the very first option shown here. And as you can see, Fusion 360 will prompt you to cut a plane. The plane I'm going to be using is the right-hand side and is shown here on the box on the right. And cutting right into it, press OK. Now you currently can't see it, but to toggle this on, you can turn on your analysis on the left-hand side. Then you can double click on it by toggling on the folder and then turning on section analysis. And as you rotate this around, you can kind of see exactly how this whole feature works. And as I rotate this about 15 to 20 degrees, you can see the cutout for our lips sit here, and the top for the container is what's going to hold this lid in place. And just kind of wrapping this around, just kind of getting a better look and seeing how everything works. Additionally, we can also create a section analysis for the top by pressing S, type in section analysis, then selecting the top and dragging this down. I went ahead and dragged this down by around -5 millimeters, and this gives us a pretty good look as to what's going on inside without having to manually look around it within our canvas. By pressing OK, you can see that here we have our lip that sits within our lid here, and then we have the container that has this locking feature. In addition, we have this sort of cutout for this hole, where this hole is going to slide into this piece here. Now, the last thing we need to do here is to circular pattern these features for our lid all around our design, so that way we have those cutouts all around it. To do that, we can toggle off container 1, then press circular pattern by searching for it, and then selecting the last features relevant to this design, which is the last 3. Selecting the axis, which is the Z-axis, and press OK. Now we have the cutouts for our design, and if we turn on container 1, you can see now we have the pieces to making this a fully complete and functional design where the design locks in place. What we want to do now is to create an as-built joint so we can kind of see these things in action. If we press S on our keyboard, type in as-built joint, then what we want to do is set the type to revolute, select the lid or the top, then select the container, and let's go ahead and revolute this right in the center of the origin. And as you can see, now we have the item revoluting, and there's a small little flag that appears on screen if you were to double click it and take a good look as to what's going on here. If we were to rotate this in, you can kind of see the clicking effect, or you can kind of imagine it happening once it reaches in. That's what we're looking for with this design. I'll go ahead and set this to -8. And as you can see, you can kind of see it inside our canvas here. Now, it's a little hard to tell, but if you really want to get a better look, you can go ahead and double click on your section analysis and just drag this down a little bit further so that way you can kind of see more of what's going on. What I'm really looking for is for this piece to kind of line up with this piece here. So I'm going to go ahead and use the as-built component we just created, moving the flag, and just dragging it in so that way it matches up. And as you can see, it matches up and it overextends just by a little bit, 9, and that's where it tends to match up. Pretty cool. So with all that said, there's one additional thing I'm also going to do here. I'm also going to create an offset for the lid here. To do that, I'm going to turn off container 1, then hover underneath and turn off any sort of analysis tools that we have. What I'm going to do is just press pull by clicking on this face here, press pull, and press pulling this by around -0.4. I'm also going to repeat the exact same thing on all 3 sides here, and then just press pulling this by around -0.4, which is about 1 layer line. Press OK. And what this essentially does, it gives us a little bit more wiggle room to fit in the piece and for it to lock in. So if we turn on our container 1, then turn on our analysis and take a better look, kind of see we have more space for this to fit in with a little bit more wiggle room. And you can also turn this in and kind of see there's a little bit more space for us to play with this and to fit the mechanism inside. And as you can see, it fits in very nicely. One thing you can do if you want this to snap in and make it a bit easier for it to move out and in, you can also add a fillet to this. It's totally up to you how you want to add this, but it's up to you whether or not that's relevant to your design. Once you've created your container, the next thing we need to do here is to add some final touches to this design. So to do that, what we want to do is chamfer this edge here by pressing S, type in chamfer, then selecting the top lid and chamfering this in to, let's just say, around 2.5 millimeters. Next, pressing S, type in tangent plane, then selecting this face here, press OK, creating a sketch on this top face. And now what we can do is just create a circle for this design. Now keep in mind, this isn't really relevant. I'm just creating the features for this design here. Feel free to add whatever features are relevant to your design here. I'm going to go ahead and create a circle on this face here by using the tangent plane feature within Fusion, then pressing E, and just dragging this in by around 3 millimeters. Next, I'm going to go ahead and fillet this in by pressing F, selecting this edge, and then just dragging this out so that way we have this smooth sort of fillet that wraps around our design. I'm going to go ahead and select both of these edges, and as well as the inner edge, and kind of fillet this in until it looks kind of like a nice, smooth, rounded finish on this curve here. Once that's done, press OK. I'm also going to circular pattern this all around this design, pressing S, circular pattern, then selecting the last two features, selecting the axis, which is the Z axis, and then just increasing the quantity to around 5. Press OK. Now, if we take this into the rendering environment, changing this from design to render, and if we do a quick render, now we have the basic cutout of our design here with the container and the lid ready to be 3D printed on our 3D printer. Let's go ahead and hover over to design, then export this into our printer. We could toggle on bodies and then right click, export it to our slicer, and then let's go ahead and rotate this so that way we get a flat surface. And repeat the process for the top. And as you can see, if we were to slice this, our slicer should have no problem printing this. And the main reason why is because we've added fillets where necessary, and as well as to the bottom here or the lid. So that way we don't need to have any sort of supports. Now the one piece where you do need supports is underneath this, but to fix that, you can also add a chamfer. To do that, we can hover over to our design, toggle on container, then turning on our section analysis for our design. And as you can see right underneath, we'll need supports here. To do that or to fix that, press S, type in chamfer, select this inner edge, and just drag this out to around, let's just say 5 millimeters. Now, if you take this body one to your slicer environment, remove the original and move on the new one, you can see we will not need supports for our design, and it's fully 3D printable without any supports. So with all that said, that pretty much wraps up today's tutorial. In this video, we basically covered exactly how to design this 3D printable twist lock container inside Fusion 360 from start to finish. And if you also want to get access to additional tutorials, resources, or if you ever get stuck or need help, make sure to check out the 14-day challenge down below in the description. This is 14 days of complete step-by-step tutorials, taking you from a complete beginner to an absolute pro when it comes to designing your own models for 3D printing. The best part about this challenge is that all the designs that you create and make are 100% yours to keep, to sell and share online, and as well as you're able to upload them for point or rewards. So with that said, feel free to check out the link to the challenge down below in the description. And with that said, make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.